Hey, so this is a bit of a different kind of video in that it isn't quite as thought out as usual, and I'm putting all of this together fairly quickly. I'm recording this in one take as to minimize editing time since it's a bit time sensitive. I'm just trying this out to see how I feel about making more of these style videos in between the longer ones I typically do, so we'll see. So the day I'm recording this, Wave 5 of the Booster Course Pass has officially been released for a year now. To be honest, I just wanted to talk about it and not have to wait until I get to these tracks in the Mario Kart 8 ranking. That is, who knows how long down the line, considering I'm still editing the 64 video. A lot of you may be wondering, why Wave 5 specifically? It really comes down to the fact that this is the wave where my hype for the Booster Course Pass hit its all-time peak. That isn't to say I didn't like Wave 6, in fact I wouldn't even mind making a rambly video like this in a few months to talk about it. What it ultimately comes down to though is the fact that just about every track this wave I had been anticipating since the Booster Course Pass was announced, with 3 exceptions that I either started anticipating later on, or I had other reasons as to why I was excited. So starting with the Wave 5 cities, Los Angeles and Vancouver were both tracks that I had been excited to see in 8 for a long time. It killed me when LA was delayed out of Wave 4, though I did also understand how it was simply more fitting to be in a summer wave instead of a spring one. Vancouver, on the other hand, was leaked for Wave 6, so it was very much a pleasant surprise to see it show up early, even if I'd argue the original Wave City lineup of it in Athens would have been better as the final batch of cities, rather than Rome and Madrid. Speaking of Athens, it was a relatively new city at the time, being one of the only 2 cities to show up in 8 before all 3 routes were available in Tour. It's also one of, if not the best city tracks in general, despite a couple missteps in the track design and the transition to 8 Deluxe. So it was definitely nice to see it show up this wave, albeit fairly expected, all things considered. Going back to the other 2 cities, while I don't think they're the best ones we've had, hell, I was getting worried before the wave launch that people were hyping Vancouver up too much based on the suspension bridge route. I think they're pretty worthy additions and make Wave 5 easily the most consistent city lineup among the other waves. Los Angeles is definitely flat compared to most of the cities, but at the same time, it is probably the least amount of overlap between its 3 routes, allowing for all 3 laps to stand out as their own distinct experiences and not have it just be an amalgamation mess of a course like some tracks like Rome are. Vancouver, on the other hand, is a bit safer. Route 1, of course, is the famous suspension bridge route, but going in, I was worried by how much the 2nd and 3rd routes blended together in Tour, since half of both of those routes go through the exact same portion of the track. Fortunately, this doesn't bug me as much in 8, especially with them using an exit from the hockey rink that was unused in Tour for lap 2. But it does, unfortunately, cause the track to kind of fumble the landing by making it shortest and most derivative lap the last one. Moving on to the retro lineup, this one had, at least on paper, what I would consider to be the most hyped lineup of any other wave, especially for me. Daisy Cruiser, Sunset Wilds, and Koopa Cape are all fan favorites in their respective games, and were tracks I was anticipating from the moment the Booster Course Pass was first announced. I think for most people, Daisy Cruiser is the most consistent out of these 3 picks. All of the changes made were purely additions that only added on to the theming of the track. The track just feels so much more alive now that it's populated by bystanders, and because of this, I can definitely say this is the retro in Wave 5 that can best replace its original, at least assuming your enjoyment of the track doesn't hinge entirely on the presence of life preservers and the staircase at the end, in which case, valid. Sunset Wilds, on the other hand, is possibly one of the most controversial retro tracks in the entire series, and I definitely get why. Removing the main gimmick of the track, even if it's purely an aesthetic change, is definitely not something that would go down well with most fans. As for me personally, I have very mixed feelings on this remake because of this. I'm happy the tour layout is preserved, and I think it's a very fun track to drive on still. The main aesthetics are still there, and I think by default this version controls better than the original. Without the sun setting, though, it is hard to confidently say this is the definitive Sunset Wilds experience. It's so unfortunate, too, because I feel like if they kept it, more fans would have accepted this remake for what it is. I still don't understand why they made this decision, especially considering not only does the sun set in Tour, which this version is of course pulled from, but they also waited until the second to last wave, so they had to have had more than enough time to pull it off, even if there was some kind of technical issue to work around. Like, I'm sorry, but there's no way Nintendo, of all people, can have found some sort of workaround. On a more positive note, Koopa Cape was quite possibly my most anticipated course for the entire Booster Course Pass. I had always thought it was a missed opportunity that the Wii Retro picks in 7 weren't saved for Mario Kart 8, considering they're some of the most iconic, well-loved tracks in the entire series. So of course I wanted to see all 4 make a return in this pass. Aside from that though, this is definitively my favorite track from Mario Kart Wii. Sorry for the spoilers, I guess. Like, don't get me wrong, Waluigi Pinball is my favorite track overall, and it has been since I first got Mario Kart DS when I was 8. But that track was such an obvious shoo-in for the Booster Course Pass, it's not even funny. Especially considering the Prefix Data Mine had a DS track as the finale for the first cup of Wave 2. Since Coconut Mall was in the exact same slot of Wave 1, it was pretty easy to connect some dots. Koopa Cape, on the other hand, only felt like it had less pushing for it the further we got into the pass. Sure, it was added to Tour during the months following Wave 1, so it was a pretty clear pick, especially when Wii Rainbow Road was the 6th track from Wii added to Tour, aligning with it being data mined as the 6th and final Wii track of the Booster Course Pass. The thing though is they kept going. In the months between Waves 4 and 5, we were hit with another barrage of Wii tracks, all of which now had the distinction of never returning as a retro before Tour. We got Dry Dry Ruins in March, Daisy Circuit a few months later in May, and finally Moonview Highway dropped in Tour almost exactly 1 week before the Wave 5 reveal trailer. By this point, I remember seeing speculation make a sudden shift. Koopa Cape seemed to be becoming an underdog for Wave 5 despite its fan favorite status and the fact that it's thematically perfect for a summer wave. We had gotten 3 of the 4 Wii Retros that returned in 7 back, so now that we are being met with 3 new options that never even gotten a remake before Tour, are we really going to get Koopa Cape over its competition? I mean, there's only 2 Wii tracks left in the pass according to data mines, one of which is almost certainly Rainbow Road. It might have been silly in retrospect to think this way, but I was starting to feel like one of the only Koopa Cape defenders left, which made the fact that its music was the one used for the Wave 5 trailer all the more relieving. As for the track itself in 8, I used to think this was recency bias, and I already know this will be a bit of a controversial take, but I genuinely think this is the definitive version of Koopa Cape. Yes, I know the pipe section is still flooded and missing the electric hazards like in the 3DS version. Honestly, knowing that would be the case because of Tour made me mildly worried for when the track did come to 8 Deluxe. The thing is, there's a few alterations made compared to the Tour version, all of which work heavily in its favor. The underwater section is anti-grav, adding spin boosts that reward speed for staying in the middle, much like the stream did in this section in the original. The glider ramp from the 3DS and Tour versions is removed, maintaining the original intent of the river section and not having you just glide over half of it. Finally, the track is scaled down, which I did find disappointing at first, but upon multiple replays, I do now appreciate this change, as well as the 2 I mentioned before, for helping maintain the feeling of momentum that this track was originally famous for. Hell, even minor changes like being able to trick off of the waterfall leading to the underwater section add to this and make this one of the most genuinely fun tracks to play on in 8 Deluxe. Like, I'm serious, this version of Koopa Cape had me questioning whether Waluigi Pinball is still my favorite track in the series or not, and even now I feel like I can go either way. Now, I mentioned before how there were 3 tracks this wave I hadn't anticipated from the beginning, one of which was Athens Dash since that track didn't even exist when the BCP was announced. We now move on to the other 2. You may remember that I said 3 Wii tracks were added to tour between Waves 4 and 5, all of which were in competition for the Wave 5 Wii track slot. As it turned out though, some changes happened behind the scenes, and instead of there being 1 Wii track left before Wave 6, we actually had 2. This caught just about everyone off guard upon the reveal of Wave 5, but it's the track they landed on specifically that hit me particularly hard. This is a Discord conversation between me and my friend shortly before Wave 1 launched, in which we were generally talking about our expectations for the Booster Course Pass. The conversation turned to what we thought the Wii representation would look like, and I said this. Literally just throw in a Koopa cape and maybe something crazy like Moonview Highway or something, and I'm happy. Over the next year, I'm paying attention to the ID gaps for tour, and I noticed one opens up that pretty much confirms one of the remaining Wii tracks that starts with an M. I recognize that it could be Moonview, but as to not get my hopes up, I assume it would probably just end up being Moo Moo Meadows or, more likely, Mario Circuit. Eventually, details of the last summer of content for tour gets leaked one way or another, with the final track for Wii seeming to be Moonview Highway. Of course, I'm now cautiously optimistic about its chances to be in tour since I don't want to fully lock in believing leaks, no matter how trustworthy. Of course, the night tour rolls around, already being hyped because we get a new city and tour's first Donkey Kong alt. Tour fans will understand the significance of that. But also coming with official concrete news that yes, the M gap for Wii was indeed for Moonview Highway. I'm of course excited, but I am also a little bittersweet. I'm happy to see a new version of Moonview, but I know it probably won't be an 8. And besides, I'd rather have Koopa Cape anyway. So I wake up on the morning that Wave 5 was revealed, and see my friend message me on Discord. The only message visible in my notifications said, I thought there were only 2 Wii slots left. So already I'm like, huh? Apparently Wave 5 has 2 Wii tracks and presumably neither are Rainbow Road? Okay, sure, let me watch the trailer. The third track shown off, and there it was. My crackpot pie in the sky unlikely track pick made the pass, and it was not at the cost of my favorite Wii track either. Genuinely, I don't even care how this remake turned out. Don't get me wrong, I think it's a good remake anyway, even if the chaos isn't quite there in the same way it was in Wii. But genuinely, even if this turned out to be a disappointing remake, my disappointment would have been overshadowed by the fact that this track actually made it in. 1 year later, and I still don't fully believe that this track made the pass. It just felt so unlikely from the start, and even in that message I sent back in March of 2022, I didn't even expect it to show up in tour, much less 8 Deluxe. This track is a key contributor to why my hype peaked at Wave 5. But that isn't even the last. The summer before Wave 5, right after Wave 2 was announced, I started uncovering more and more discussions about future track state of mind for tour, specifically future Nitros. Among these were a couple city tracks, presumably based on Athens, Madrid, and possibly Orlando. There were a few non-city Nitros too, with one seemingly supposed to be based on the game Yoshi's Island. What stuck out to me the most, though, was what was looking to be a bathroom theme track. Of course, I had a hell of a morbid curiosity about this track, because on paper, that shit simply sounds insane. At the same time, though, this stuck out to me as exactly the inventive kind of track theme we saw in tracks like Coconut Mall, Waluigi Pinball, and even the Mario Kart 8 version of Ribbon Road. That one especially gave me hope, because conceptually, I saw a bathroom track as being pulled off very similarly. So I waited, and waited, and finally on the morning of the June 2023 Direct, we get our first look at Wave 5, and there it was, Squeaky Clean Sprint. Admittedly, the name could have been a lot better than it was, but that didn't matter. We finally are seeing the bathroom track, and it looks good. Like most of the non-city tour Nitros, especially those that ended up dropping in the Booster Course Pass first, Squeaky Clean Sprint is very much the main event for Wave 5 for most. It was definitely one of my most anticipated tracks for the Wave, even after getting the full trailer. This ended up being the last of the 3 tracks in the Booster Course Pass that was labeled as new, and among the 3 that they chose to launch in 8 Deluxe first, I think they mostly hit the nail on the head. Sunday was a bit of a miss, but at least it was the first new track, so it wasn't too big a deal in the grand scheme of things. Alongside this track, we also had this wave's batch of characters announced, which at the time, the quantity was a little strange. As far as we knew, there were 5 characters left after Wave 4, so it was reasonable to assume Wave 5 would have 2 and Wave 6 would have 3, in order to have the final wave end with the most characters. Wave 5 ended up having 3 though, which was strange, but eventually made sense when we got our Wave 6 characters announced. As for the characters themselves, we had Petey Piranha, who was one of the biggest shoo-ins once we had characters announced for the pass, considering we knew we'd eventually be getting Piranha Plant Cove. Kamek was also a fairly safe guess, since he was famously cut from multiple Mario Kart rosters, including 8 itself, before finally debuting in Tour, so his name was pretty commonly thrown around in speculation. The biggest standout, who quickly became my new secondary, Boner Gang for life, was Wigler. This was a cool announcement in a few regards. For one, Wigler was one of the few newcomers in Mario Kart 7, and was possibly the most well-received of the bunch, so it was exciting to see it playable again. Going off of that though, this was its second playable appearance, as it brought the trend of track picks showing up in the Booster Course Pass before Tour over to the character picks too. Wigler was not yet in Tour at the time of both Wave 5 announcements and its release, though this actually brings me to my last aspect about Wave 5 release day that I want to talk about. The day that Wave 5 released was probably the biggest day for Mario Kart fans in a long time. This goes beyond Mario Kart 8 though, as this wave just so happened to drop on the exact same day that a new tour started on Mario Kart Tour. For those who don't know, Mario Kart Tour rotates its content every 2 weeks, with tracks and characters being made available during themed tours. This one is significant though because it is one of the rare tours that introduced a non-city Nitro, with this one appearing in Tour before it did in 8 Deluxe. This was the Pipe Tour, and aside from adding Wigler as a driver on the same day it was added to Mario Kart 8, it also introduced the brand new track Piranha Plant Pipeline, which you may know eventually ended up being the only Nitro from Tour left that didn't come to the Booster Course Pass. So essentially between the 2 games, on top of the fact that we got new tracks added to 8 in general, as well as some new characters, we ended up getting 2 brand new, never before seen in any capacity tracks made available for the Mario Kart series as a whole. Like, when I tell you this was a hype-ass day that just kept on giving, I absolutely mean it. One last point about Wave 5 I like to touch on is the music of the tracks. Depending on who you talk to, the tracks here could be seen as hit or miss, but the one constant among all 8 is the absolutely amazing music. Mario Kart 8 and the Booster Course Pass as a whole was known for its amazing music, including live renditions of retro track music, but this wave was simply next level. From the half techno, half jazzy banger that is Moonview Highway to a new rendition of Daisy Cruiser, complete with new string fills that elevate the music to a degree I never thought possible. There is not a single piece of music here I would skip if it showed up on my playlist. The Cherry Cup especially stands out to me, since all 4 tracks are ones I was especially wanting to hear Mario Kart 8 renditions of for a long time. Sunset Wilds absolutely killed it, despite the controversy surrounding the track itself. Los Angeles was reimagined with saxophone and bass, sounding like it came straight from a beach party, and Vancouver inspired me to send this text the moment the strings started hitting in its intro. Koopa Cape is especially exciting, since it brings the long-awaited return of the river variant of the music, and genuinely, I think that's the best version of this music ever, like just in general. The ending with the fiddle counter melody is so fucking good, and I feel like it's worth giving a clean play real quick just so y'all can hear that shit too. Overall, I just wanted to make this video to share my feelings about that day, because now that we've hit it again, I'm being reminded of the insane amount of hype I felt last summer. I know how opinions are about some tracks in Wave 5, but even with that, I can still confidently say it's my favorite wave of the bunch. I also wanted to make this video to spread awareness about Pipeline. I imagine it'll probably end up in the next Mario Kart game anyway, but it's still such a bummer that it won't be available very much until then. Do yourself a favor and download Mario Kart Tour right now so you can experience this track before it's gone again on July 24th. It's genuinely hard to say what the future of Tour will look like after the 5th anniversary in September, since we're already approaching the end of the loop year. Who knows if they're going to do another loop or just shut the game down entirely. Even if it does loop again, we won't be seeing Pipeline again until next July, so please go check the track out while you can right now, just so you don't have to get stuck waiting for another year at minimum. Downer ending aside, I'd love to hear how y'all feel about this wave, and even the shorter, more specific video format in general. Feel free to chat in the comments. I'd love to talk and spread the love in this wave. That's about it for today, so bye! I just want to add that I think it's absolutely insane that they decided to make Sunset Wilds available in the Pipe Tour too. Nintendo has massive balls for that one.